It's great to be here with you. Good morning, depending on where you are in the country here. Really an honor to talk about storytelling with you. Quick background, I've been in the branding, advertising, marketing world for 35 plus years. I ran my own ad agency in Phoenix, Arizona for 20 of those years, really focused on brand development. But I found story in early 2000 when technology took over e-commerce, social media. It just completely, of course, changed the whole dynamic of what we did at the agency. Our brands, customers used to own the influence of mass media, but the masses had become the media. So we've got to learn how to communicate differently. And it's just gotten louder and more cacophonous ever since. When I got into it, I was studying it. We were lucky, our middle child, our son Parker, was going to film school at Chapman University. And so I said, dude, send me your books when you're done with them, since I'm paying for them, because I want to know, what does Hollywood teach you to be a competitive storyteller in the most competitive storytelling market in the world, Hollywood? And he did. And so I really studied up on the hero's journey, the 12 to 17 steps, depending on who you read. I read The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler, which is a marvelous textbook. I've read hundreds of these. And what I found was that this hero's journey was so powerful in all of our communication. I even wrote a book about it called the Brand Bewitchery. And this is my 10-step story cycle system that helps create brand story strategy. But it's too complicated for day in and day out use. Through all of my journeying, looking at storytelling, I came across the and button, therefore, and I'll introduce you to the gentleman who taught it to me over a decade ago. And when I saw it from a brand standpoint of taking a complex message and making it simple, using the three forces of story: agreement, contradiction, consequence, well, it blew me away. So he and I became fast friends, and we have developed this concept over time. He sharing it with the science world, me sharing it with the business world: leadership development, sales and marketing development, brand development, even in HR. So what I want to do, I'm keeping an eye on the time. I'm going to take you very quickly through an abbreviated course so that you have a better understanding of how this ABT works. And then we're going to build one afterwards and open it up for questions. So if you have questions as we go, put them in the chat room, and I'm sure Mahan will get me up to speed. Ask those when I'm all said and done here. So let's dive in. By the way, I'm coming to you from northern Arizona out here in the mountains, and I've got one of those exceedingly powerful DSL connections. So if it's a little fuzzy, that's because I'm bringing you story from the Great West up in the Pines, just south of Flagstaff. So the ABTs of Selling, a framework for compelling communications. I'm also doing a course in the ABTs of leadership and the ABTs of branding, in that this framework works for everything in storytelling. And why storytelling? Well, I was lucky. This time last year was invited out to Necker Island, Richard Branson, in a group out there where I taught them my approach to storytelling. And the ABT is right at the heart of it. And he, of course, is a leader that knows storytelling better than most. In fact, I love this quote: entrepreneurs who make a difference are, in effect, professional storytellers. And I couldn't agree with that more. So where does it all begin? These three words: and, but, therefore. And you're looking at it, you're thinking, okay, that seems way too basic, way too simple. How does it possibly work? I want you to think about it as a three-act structure of setup, problem, resolution. This is so powerful because it uses those three forces of story that I mentioned earlier, and is this statement of agreement that validates your audience view of the world and what it is that they want to raise the stakes in their life, to lead a better life. The but statement, the problem statement, is the contradiction, but here's why they don't currently have it. Therefore, the consequence of that is you. Here's how you are there to help them get what they want. It places your audience at the center of the story where every audience needs to be. So you think about an ABT build like this: name your audience, describe what they want, and why it is important to them. You're going to raise the stakes. Do not start with the problem. Always start with what a better tomorrow looks like. Make it aspirational, saying this is what we wish for in the future. But then you introduce the problem. But here's why you don't currently have it, the obstacles and antagonists in your way, and therefore here's how you are uniquely equipped to help them get it. Now, this dynamic of setup problem resolution plays to our cause and effect, pattern-seeking limbic system, the subconscious primal apparatus in our brain where all of our real buying decisions are being made. You think about it. We buy into anything, we're buying with our hearts. It's our subconscious doing this buying for us. Then all we do is justify that purchase with our logical mind, with that frontal cortex. But what do? We often lead with logic and reason, but we don't connect when we do that because our audiences want the emotional pull of a story. And this little fundamental framework is the simplest, most powerful way that you can hook any audience from the very start. I learned this from my good friend now, Dr. Randy Olson, Harvard PhD evolutionary biologist, gives it up, goes to USC Film School, graduates, produced 3 documentaries on climate change and global warming, but more importantly, has written 7 books now teaching scientists how to use what he learned in Hollywood to be able to communicate their big ideas. He's doing a ton of work right now with CDC, Dr. Osterholm, and others in communicating and helping them kind of clean up their communication around COVID. Well, when I found this back in 2013 from Randy, I said, that's awesome how it's working in the science world. I want to translate it over to the business world. And I've been doing that ever since. He and I then came out with this book earlier, September of this past year, called The Narrative Gym for Business. A year earlier, he had written The Narrative Gym, which is primarily for science and academia. And I said, Randy, my business people want something that really demonstrates its use in the business and leadership world with examples. And so let's rewrite it, co-author it. And this is one particularly for the business world. Since we've launched one for the Narrative Gym for Law and the Narrative Gym for Politics, both of those written by other writers who are famous in their own domain of law and politics. Anyways, if you'd like to learn more about how we came together on this, I've got a podcast that airs once every Monday, been running it for 6.5 years. It's ranked among the top 2% of downloaded shows in the world, and it'll teach you about storytelling and how to use it from a lot of different aspects. The show number 318 happens to be with me and Randy talking about it. But when you look at this, you're thinking, okay, is this like a new thing? Is this a silver bullet, or has it been around forever? Well, in our research, it has been around from forever, since the very first recorded story of Gilgamesh, down to any nursery rhyme. If you think right now and stop for a second, what's the one nursery rhyme that first pops into your head? If you recite that nursery rhyme, you will see that it is a perfect and button. Therefore, for instance, Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet and she was eating her curds and whey. But along came a spider who sat down beside her, therefore frightened Miss Muffet away. Set up, problem, resolution, agreement, contradiction, consequence. This is the way our brains love to make meaning out of the madness of being human beings. Our great leaders of our time know this, and there are examples throughout all of their speeches how they use the and, but, and therefore. Major media, New York Times, NPR, when you're listening to NPR promote an upcoming segment, listen for that but. They do it extremely well. Do they know they're doing the ABT? Probably not. They're just natural storytellers. Intuitive. You are an intuitive storyteller as well as a Homo sapien. You're essentially a storytelling monkey like we all are. But what I want you to become is an intentional one using this framework, because you see all the great storytelling brands using it. My book I mentioned earlier shares how you use the ABTs in brand story development. And you will see it throughout pop culture. Now, you recognize Carly Rae Jepsen here? Well, she has a song called Me Maybe. And in the chorus, here's the ABT. Hey, I just met you and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe. Now, whether or not you're a Carly Rae Jepsen fan doesn't matter. What is impressive is this single, this Call Me Maybe tune has over 1.3 billion views on YouTube. And is it because they use the ABT in the chorus? Probably a pretty good chance. It's rather catchy. Did they know they were using the ABT? No, just good intuitive storytelling songwriters. Again, want to move you from being intuitive yourself into intentional. And here's why. Cartman makes this point for me.
I'm going down to South Park, gonna have myself a time.
Now, whether you're a South Park fan or not, doesn't matter with the point I want to make next. The fact of the matter is it's one of the longest running TV shows ever, TV series ever. And Matt Stone and Trey Parker, who create South Park, produce a show in 6 days. I mean, there is no room for error. So if there's a new South Park on Comedy Central this coming Sunday, what are we? We are Tuesday today. They are finishing up the script, and then we'll send it off to production late today or first thing tomorrow morning. Now, how can they do this and be so successful? Well, they follow this concept of rule of replacement, and you'll see how it plays into the ABT. Here's Trey Parker talking about it.
South Park has been so successful over the years, not only because their episodes contain satire, but because their episodes contain proper story structure. The rule that Trey and Matt use in their writer's room is called the but, therefore rule.
We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words and then belong between those beats, you're f***ed. Between every beat that you've written down is either the word therefore or but. Should be this happens, and therefore this happens. But this happens, therefore this happens. You get a show that feels like, okay, this to that, to this to that, but this, here's the complication to that.
That last line is the most important. But this, here's the complication to that. Now, how does it play into your world? In all organizational business and a lot of leadership communication, we get stuck in the world of and. This litany of exposition that bores our audience to death. With the ABT, you get one and. But here's the complication that triggers the limbic system to lean in. Therefore, here's the answer to that. So let's take a look at it. You saw Lincoln earlier, the Gettysburg Address, and I'll paraphrase as a perfect and button, therefore. We were once a great and mighty nation, but now we're embroiled in a great civil war. Therefore, we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, and here's what we need to do about it. Now, what's fascinating to me about the Gettysburg Address is that when I did research on this, I learned that Lincoln was not the keynote speaker at Gettysburg that day. A guy was on stage before him, Edward Everett, spoke for 2 hours and is completely lost to history. Lincoln steps up, delivers a Gettysburg Address, 2 minutes, roughly 272 words long, and look at the ideal and, but, therefore. A fabulous communicator, fabulous storyteller. He knew that he needed these dimensions of agreement in that and statement, contradiction, but here's the problem we're solving for. Therefore, here's what we're going to do about it. Another great leader, JFK.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
So even though he's not always using the exact words, you can see that structure. He used the and, he used the but the because was essentially his therefore, and here's what we're going to do about it. One last example that I think really bridges this gap between leadership and branding, marketing, and communications. Wesleyan Grier came to me about a year ago. She is a sales consultant, and she came from the science world. She was a scientist. She worked in science for about 10 years. But gravitated over to sales because she just found she really liked sales strategy and activation better than science. She was working with me with a number of women in a sales coaching. I was helping them with their brand story, and they were all sales coaches and strategists to some point. But they all did something different. When Wesleyan showed up, I didn't know what she did differently. She just sounded like everybody else there, and therefore was commoditized in the sales realm. Well, when I first started talking with her then, I learned about her background and then found out that she really focuses on STEM companies that are servicing the STEM industry in education as well as science and technology. And she was all about helping these CEOs grow these companies. And she said the main problem was that they would have these robust companies going, and instead of bringing in an outside salesperson to head up strategy and sales, they would just promote one of their top performing engineers or scientists and say, hey, you're doing such a great job here. Now you're going to direct our sales. but they never gave them any training. So sales fell flat. That's where she comes in, understanding the scientific method, the scientific mentality, and teaching them how to build. So here's her ABT that defines her brand story. She's speaking directly to her customer. You are a CEO of a STEM company, and you have tremendous opportunity for growth. But sales have stagnated because your underperforming sales leader has the wrong skill set to ensure predictable revenue. Therefore, you can upskill your people to hit quota monthly through my sales leadership blueprint developed from my knowledge of the scientific process specifically designed to help STEM companies grow. This now is her cornerstone ABT for everything that she does when she's talking about her brand. And it's led to this tagline: Wesleyan Grier, the science of selling STEM, which has then led to her podcast, The Science of Selling STEM. So her whole focused narrative came out of dialing in her and but and therefore about what she does better than anybody else to help a particular audience. And that is the power of it. So when you're writing these, you're thinking, who is your audience? What do they want? And why is it important to them? But why don't they have it? Therefore, how are you uniquely equipped better than anybody else to provide it to them? That's what we're going to be working on. I've got, by the way, an online course called the ABTs of Selling. It's 18 minutes. It's on Thinkific. I'm also coming out with one this week, the ABTs of Branding, and I will have one on the ABTs of Leadership coming up in a few, in 2 weeks. So if you want to learn more, that's where it's at. Let me jump out of here and let's get to your questions and our next step in this prezzo.
Yeah, let's get the party started, Park. So I encourage everyone with your questions, submit them to me in the Q&A feature. I'll make sure to ask Park those questions and incorporate them in the conversation. So Park, one of the first questions I wanted to start out with is there is an emotional element in storytelling. So within the and, but, therefore framework, where would you put in the emotional tug of the human experience? Go ahead.
Yeah, what we have found, and Dr. Olson and I have been teaching over 300 hours of the ABT to the science world since COVID hit. And in the teaching of that, we have learned so much. And we have found, and then we did some research on this, that word but is the trigger word in the English language that gets people's attention because it signifies a change in plot direction. Now, some of your leaders here may say, dude, I have always been coached, never use the word but. And I agree with you if you are working with someone and you're saying, hey, Park, our team really loves having you here. You've been this terrific contributor here. But, well, you've just negated everything that has come before that. So you don't want to use the word but there because that is not good. However, if you are trying to attract people into seeing your way in the world, you start with the emotional tug of that and statement. You open the story loop with the and. Hey, Mahan, you want this. And you know how important storytelling is to connect, but you feel it's a little bit clunky or it's hard to understand. Therefore, let's start with this simple little ABT thing. So we've identified first what you want and getting you nodding, saying, yes, you understand me, you get what I want, you empathize with where I'm going, but I don't have it because of this problem. Therefore, it sounds like you might be the right person to help me with it because you get where I am. Does that make sense? So you really have emotional tugs throughout, but it's that but you want to hit hard because that suggests that change of direction. Our cause and effect limbic system loves that stuff. Just like, okay, now what?
Yeah, and Park, as I've thought about this more, I also think about the fact that whether it's in personal relationships and conversations or even in political conversations, a lot of times I have caught myself starting with the buts, with the disagreements. But part of the point that you make is that it's really important to set up that agreement and the and before getting to the jarring but.
Yeah, you do because, and we've all had this happen to us. you go in and you sit down and you immediately launch into the problem. And all of a sudden you notice your audience kind of sit back and they kind of cross their arms because you're making an assumption that they recognize what the actual problem is. That, when you say that, they may think the problem is something completely different than how you see it. So you've already set up this divisive relationship because you haven't really completely understood them yet. That's why we want you to start with the and. It makes you, as the storyteller, communicator, to really understand your audience and what they want, so you can validate that position and getting them to nod with you. So you're exactly right, Park. And then I say, but you probably don't have it because of this. And they go, I think you're right. I used to think it was because of this, but now that you said it, you're right. It is because of this. And the reason why that is you are the expert in the conversation. You're the one that are trying to get them to see the world the way you see the world so that you can actually help them in your therefore statement. And that only comes from truly understanding them and making sure you nail that statement of agreement up top.
Yeah, our receptivity becomes a lot more, we're more likely to even listen to that. So for me, that has been really enlightening. I would like us to see if we can work through an example for the group. And being that people heard a little bit about what Mark is all about, and he's got this inspiring vision with our Shared Humanity Project, if we could work on Mark's ABT, and others, feel free to, again, in Q&A, because I won't be monitoring chat as much. In Q&A, if you have questions or if you want to run ABTs, let us know. And this is how we are going to learn. So Mark, let's see, Park, let's see if we can walk Mark through an ABT structure.
I would love that. Thanks, Mark, for playing along here. So Mark, now you've got a cheat sheet because you've been through the program just very quickly right here. Let's say you and I just sat down and we're just getting acquainted for the very first time. And maybe I'm a benefactor. You're looking at me, or you tell me who you want me to be as a respective audience for you. How in under 15 seconds would you use an ABT to describe your organization or what you do from my perspective?
I'd say that we're a compassionate people, and we've spent trillions of dollars on poverty in the last 50 years, but we still have 75 million Americans who don't have enough money to get by. Therefore, we need a new approach to addressing and eradicating poverty in this country.
All right, excellent. So you did a great job of very concisely talking about what you do. Now I want to take the focus off of you, and I want you to put it on your audience. What's in it for me? You help me get what I want, then of course, my actions will help you get what you want right there, but you are positioning it using an ABT from my perspective.
We all want to live in a safe community, and you care about the people who live around you, but there's poverty in every zip code, including yours. Therefore, we can take action locally to make sure everybody in our community has a decent quality of life.
All right, that's awesome. You're getting closer.
I tried.
You started off with we. I want you to make it about me. I want you a singular narrative. Park, you want what? And it's important to you because of what? As it relates to your offering.
You work hard for a living. You want your family to live in a secure neighborhood, but a lot of people don't have that opportunity. And therefore we need to create better systems, better structures for everyone to be able to provide for their families.
So in that case, you're talking about a security issue. I mean, that's the thing I heard. We're always looking at that singular narrative. The way you frame that now, it's a security issue for me. You want to live in a great community and keep your family safe, but other people can't do that. Therefore, so that would work for me if you knew that your prospect, your audience was really concerned about security, which is totally fine. What you're always really trying to understand is who they are, what they want, and why that's important to them. And then when you do the but, you want to get as much contradiction in there as possible. You really want that contrast of here's what nirvana looks like, here's what heaven looks like, but it's currently hell because of this. Therefore, here's what we're doing about getting you to nirvana. So with that thought, how could you even do one more ABT and be even a little bit more specific in your but and your therefore on how you deliver that?
Park, can I quickly jump in here?
Yeah.
That initial agreements, I find it to be more appealing if it's a more positive, it appeals to a positive emotion than a negative emotion. So in my mind, if it's aspirational in terms of my belief that we should eradicate poverty or whatever else it is, it's more appealing and I'm more willing to go on than if it is my desire for safety and security for my family. All of a sudden, to me, it closes me up. So that's just a couple of thoughts as we're working on this process.
Yeah, you always want to keep that statement of agreement positive and aspirational. Now, you can start with a negative, but then what happens is once you get to that but had better be positive. So it's a contradiction to what happened up top. And those will work, but those can get you in trouble if you don't really have your ABT dialed in. So Mahan, you're exactly right. Always start with like very aspirational. What does a brighter tomorrow look like?
We back to me now.
Yeah. And by the way, thanks, Mark. This is not easy. I was once given the best advice as a writer, a copywriter for an ad agency when I took a script in to my boss and he sent it back and he could see that I was a little bit, beaten up over the whole editing process. And he goes, Park, it's a lot easier to be an editor than a writer. So I'm sitting in the catbird seat. You're in the hot seat. So
no, I definitely feel that. I love this. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever speak again to anyone without and but therefore. So well, hopefully I will. But I would come back with, you love your family and you love your community, and I can't get away from the word we. So maybe that's too.
That's
preachy.
all right. Yeah.
And we all want to live in a connected community, but last year alone, 10,000 kids were, killed or were the victims of violence in low-income communities that did not have economic stability. Therefore, we need a new approach to how we can take action locally to make sure people have economic stability.
Now, let me ask you too, Mark, this is the brander in me that comes in. And I think, gosh darn it, there are 10,000 nonprofits out there that do everything it sounds like Mark's talking about here. How is yours different? So what is the key problem your organization solves that separates you from all other nonprofits out there that are kind of swimming in the same lane?
National and focus, and the only mission is how do we eradicate poverty nationally?
Okay, that's too general for me. So that's great. And we're at 50,000 feet. Awesome. Let's drill down. Why aren't we doing that? And you can even use an ABT on yourself as you start figuring this out for yours. Your organization is about eradicating poverty nationally. But why is it not working? And therefore, how are you there to make it work more efficiently?
We typically are too reliant on government, and we absolve ourselves, each of us, of personal responsibility for this. So we try to personalize this approach and make it that anybody of any age and any experience can take action immediately in their community, because there's poverty in every zip code.
Okay, so what does that mean? We're still generalized. That's cool. That's awesome. But now we're at 30,000 feet. What do you do? Do you have a program in place? Is it step-by-step proven that shows you exactly what you do so you're not wasting time and resources and can have that ultimate impact? Or what is it that you functionally do different and therefore better than anybody else?
So we provide data on every county in the United States to tell people not what the poverty level is, but what do they need to get by in their community? How much do you need to get by in your community? And many other issues related to poverty, like internet access. I don't want to go too detailed now, but
yeah,
we have data on every community. And then we have an action guide so that everybody can take action, no matter their experience or age. And then we focus on how we can connect with one another. So we're talking about learning, acting, and connecting.
and you use that data to give you, kind of the what's happening in that community, the vital signs of that community. You use that data so this community needs to really focus on job creation, while this community here needs to focus more on childcare. Those are the core problems in these separate communities, and we're going to come in and help you in each one of those. Do I have that quite right?
Until the end, absolutely right. That we want to tell you, gosh, this is the most important action in your community, because everybody might want to provide food, whereas internet access is most important, or healthcare, or childcare. And so when you take action, we want you to take informed action. And we don't want to tell you what to do. We want to give you some ideas, but you do it yourselves.
Informed action. All right. Now, to me, that just hit me as like, that's a singular narrative. Informed action. Our job is to help eradicate poverty throughout the nation, but so often that falls short because because communities are taking the improper actions as to what will actually work. Therefore, we inform you so there are no wasted resources of time, energy, money, whatever, to make the impact, the singular impact or the specific impact in the community you choose to make.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I'll use too many words all the time. The issue that keeps running through my head is this is a plan for everyone, right? That in poverty space, we too often want to say government should do that. This should be the policy. And all I have to do is talk about it. We're trying to say, look, the way to solving poverty is through everybody taking action. And we build a community of actors.
And that's cool. So what you'll do too is you will use ABTs with all your different audiences. So now you might have an ABT about don't wait for the government to take action. Nothing in this ABT makes sense or in this story except in light of personal action. So, we have made great strides in eradicating poverty in America, but we have a long way to go because so many people are sitting on the sidelines thinking their government is going to take action. Therefore, we provide you with the informed data, whatever, for you to step in and take individual action on the specific needs of your community to have the impact in the world you wish. So you're still talking about informed action, but now in this case, it's like, stop waiting on the sidelines. So that's your singular narrative. Stop waiting on the sidelines, get in. Then another narrative may be, I don't know what to do. Hey, you want to take action and you're excited to get going, but you don't know what to do. Therefore, we're going to provide you the informed action you need to have that specific impact on your community, So what you're always looking for is not to overwhelm your audience with any more than one audience you're speaking to, one problem you are working on, even though I know you work on lots of different problems, but the one that really relates to them. And then here's how you're going about doing it. Because remember, Mark, all we're trying to do here is hook them in the first 15 to 20 seconds, and they can sit in that audience and go, oh, I know exactly what he's talking about. Then they will open it up and give you all day to go ahead and talk about your specifics on it.
And Monica Del Wadi also shared a great one, Park, as you're working with Mark. She says, you're a caring, generous member of your community. I love that open, right? That's how I feel. That's what I am. That's beautiful, Monica. And you would like to reduce poverty, right? It's give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. But it's so complicated. So what do? Therefore, we give you a solution to give you the direct action that works in your community. So this can be, the words can be worked on, but conceptually, it's elevating who I am, which I'm. It's a positive message about me, a positive message about my belief, the and, then the but, why we're not able to do this, and then therefore what Mark is providing.
Yeah, I agree. That's really well done. There's also a little tool. This is now ABT 201. It's called the if-then tool. And we will sometimes use it in that and statement of agreement. You can use it in a but. I feel like it sometimes gets clunky there, but I like it in the and statement of agreement. And it comes after the and. So could you read the beginning of her and statement again?
Yes, hold on a second. I just
You're a generous and you're a caring and generous person.
you are a caring and generous member of your community, and you would like to reduce poverty.
Okay, so and you would like to reduce poverty. Let's actually add a little bit more specificity to it now. It works the way it is, so really well done there. You're a caring and generous member of your community, and if you have all of the knowledge you need to have the impact, then if you had all the knowledge you need on the specific needs of your community, then you could have an even more amazing impact. But it's complicated because not everybody gives you that information, and you end up spinning your wheels and wasting resources. Therefore, we are all about informed impact by providing you the data specific. So I use that if then in that and statement of agreement just to make the stakes part of it after the and that much more powerful by using a little bit more specifics. And it's also triggering our cause and effect brain there too. If this, then that. And our storytelling monkey brain loves that stuff because we're just literally leading them down the road and they don't have to work for it. You have done all the heavy lifting by writing that ABT and connecting with them that way. So the if-then tool is a pretty cool little tool about adding more specificity to your ABTs.
A couple of thoughts about this, Park. First of all, even for LinkedIn posts and anytime I write, I try to incorporate the and, but, therefore, and it does make the posts much more engaging. And the other part of this is it's hard for us to read the label of our own jar, which is something a friend of mine always says, which is why when trying to communicate more important ABTs, it's important to communicate it to someone else and get this level of coaching and interaction. Because a lot of times things make sense to us, but don't resonate with others. And you need someone to push back on you. Because what I find, Park, is that we use the same messaging over and over again. And for us, there is the flow, even with the and, but, therefore. But for the audience, there isn't the flow. So depending on the importance, we need to spend some time on it.
You know what I hear too? People say, Parker, I write these and I push them out that they feel they feel obvious to me. They feel like my audience is looking at me and thinking, well, that's kind of this stilted sort of writing. And I say, don't worry about it. They do not know what you're doing. They don't realize the magic that you are using in this little algorithm of and, but, therefore. You can change therefore to so. Sometimes you don't even need the word therefore in it. I mean, it just is that call to action that follows, that is a natural conclusion or consequence to what you set up. You can use however and yet for the word but I'm like, man, if the but word's that powerful, why would I want to water that down? Just go ahead and use that but. And then 1, 2 ands at the most. That's all you get. Get in and out. Try to use one and that if then tool right after it if that works for you. I was doing a bunch of work with Home Depot and their sales leadership there. And one of their guys asked me, what's the shortest ABT you've ever written? And I go, here it is. Most executives communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, tell a story. That's basically my world. That's where it all begins.
And actually, Park, in conversations with a local politician, I broke down, not to get into the politics of it, but whether it was Trump's messaging or President Obama's messaging, there is consistent and, but, therefore, if you look at the most powerful speeches and most powerful messaging. So the process works. The question I have, Park, is for longer communications and storytelling, how can you incorporate and, but, therefore in longer form communications?
Yeah, we call those nested ABTs. And here's the way it worked. So a whole other training is the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact. An anecdote you can tell in under a minute, which is an expanded ABT that makes your business point for you. So for instance, you sit down to a lunch meeting and Mark, shares that perfect ABT to get me leaning in. And then he'll say, for instance, let me show this to you in action. He's going to tell me a short story using a timestamp. When did this happen? A location stamp, where did this happen, and a single individual in the story that I can relate to. That is essentially the and. He's just done the setup, and what is it that they want? Then we get into that 4th primal element, and that is action and surprise. Well, what happened? This is like the but section. Went down and he tried this, but then this happened, but then that happened, and then aha, we did this, and it worked. So at number 5 is the aha moment. What did we learn from this little anecdote that makes your business point for you? So now what you've done is you've used 2 narrative structures on your audience. First, the ABT to hook their limbic system. And now they're leveling up into their conscious brain. They're like, okay, prove that to me, Park. Then I'm going to tell them an emotional appeal. And I could have done all of that in under 90 seconds. Then they're like, well, that's pretty interesting. You might launch into some data points at that point just to start paying off and like delivering on the promises that you made to them emotionally. They're going to level it up and say, okay, now prove it to me with some numbers. But maybe in this long form presentation, you have 3 major points that you want to make, all leading to this singular narrative arc that you've created with your ABT. Every time you introduce a new point, you use an ABT specific to that point, demonstrating too how it connects with the overarching singular narrative you're talking about, and then deliver a little anecdotal story to illustrate your point in action, and then follow it up with the data points if you have to. And so we call those nested ABTs because you use them throughout, and all you're doing is that ABT to get them hooked, and then that little 5 primal elements of a short story to reel them in. Simplest way I know of how to use storytelling in business and leadership and sales and marketing. Forget the hero's journey, forget the Pixar way. It's just way too complicated. So now I teach it from what I learned from the complicated side and boil it down to here's the gateway drug to great business storytelling. That's the ABT.
Yeah, and again, the hero's journey and all of those thoughts work well when you have the time and go through the arc for branding of organizations. But in communication, it is way too complicated to try to make it work. So let me make sure I understand. So there is the ABT hook, then following the ABT, there is the story of a specific individual that can connect, data points if necessary, and that ends up becoming, you can nest those in longer form communications.
Yeah, I think of it this way: turn your data into drama. So we always show up and we try to appeal with logic and reason and numbers and charts and graphs, thinking that that tells a story. No, that's the data. Flip it. Start with the drama and then back it up with the data. I went to Robert McKee, who's a legendary screenwriting coach, and he's got this legendary program he's been running for years called Story. And it's 3 jam-packed days at the LAX Sheridan in LA. And he was on stage. I went to it because I want to learn how could we use this in our world of business marketing and leadership. And he said something that it really stuck with me. Now, he's not talking to marketers. He's talking to 200 screenwriters in the room. I was like the only marketer sitting there. And he says, make no mistake as you are developing your scripts and your characters, that your audience's conscious is simply the PR department for their subconscious, where all of their real buying decisions are being made. So he's saying this to screenwriters that are selling nothing but a story and getting butts in the seat. From a writer's, a marketer standpoint, I'm going, that is so true. So connect with that subconscious, that limbic system with the ABT, then tell an emotional story to start reeling them in so they can really feel it, see it in action, and then sprinkle in data if you need to, only if you need to. You might not have to at that point.
Outstanding, outstanding. And I would strongly encourage everyone to do a couple of things. First of all, Park and Randy's book is outstanding. It's a short but powerful framework to
75 pages.
Yeah. Park has a Business of Story podcast if you really want to go into storytelling. As I opened up at the beginning, Park, it's interesting because for my podcast also, I have conversations on Thursdays. It's with thought leaders, authors like you. On Tuesdays, it's with regional leaders. One of the things I've been surprised is that we have a lot of very impactful leaders who can't tell their stories or can't tell stories well. And the top global downloads for those episodes have come from the leaders that have told stories really effectively. So Marty Rogers, some of the people on this in this conversation would know Marty. Marty's is the top global download for the regional change makers, way beyond many of the more famous people, because he is a magnificent storyteller. So people emotionally connect and then recommend to others to listen to that episode. So don't assume that any of us are good at storytelling. We need constant practice, and Park's book and podcast is a great way to get started with that practice.
You know, Mahan, one last thing I'd like to share with your group here. This coming Monday, Valentine's Day, I have a special edition of the Business of Story where I don't interview guests. I typically interview guests on every one. It's just me, and it's actually my birthday on Valentine's Day. So I have a special gift for the listeners, free access to the new ABTs of branding course, but only for next week. So if you'd like to get into that, listen to my show, and at the end of it, I'll give you that free promo code to go and check it out.
Outstanding. And what we do, Nigel also asked if we could provide links to the podcast. Thank you, Debbie. You're a step ahead. But what we will do to the podcast and the book and the training, everything else, we will send out a follow-up email with resources to Park, and for everyone to feel free to follow up with him. Really appreciative of you, Park, spending your time with us. It's really powerful. And the more I'm using it, Park, I think the better I'm becoming, I hope. And the more I'm seeing ABTs in lots of communications frameworks all around. I really appreciate you joining Leadership Greater Washington for this conversation.
Can I give your viewers an assignment?
Please.
So just what Mahan said there, practice, practice, practice. Look at, you already got to write emails. So habit stack on it. Write 3 emails every day that begin with an ABT. You'll find your emails will become much shorter and you'll get much better response, but it's a great place to practice. After watching this, go and teach 2 people, colleagues, friends, loved ones, whatever, about the ABT, because you don't know what you don't know until you start teaching it. And then apply it to one big communications challenge or opportunity you have yet this week. And the idea is to do this every single day and just practice, and you will build this narrative intuition.
Totally agree with you. The capability to do it comes from the practice and getting guidance and coaching. Thank you all for being part of this conversation. Thanks most especially to you, Park. Really appreciate it. Lots of shout outs. Barbara, this was very good. Thank you so much. I'm going to practice. Love that, Barbara. Gus, ABT was very helpful. I subscribe to Park's podcast.
Awesome.
Outstanding. Nigel said wonderful, thank you. So Mitch is really appreciative of LGW organizing these and appreciative of you joining Park. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Park, and look forward to seeing some of you at the next Leadership Today session virtually, or now that LGW has started back up with in-person events, in person, so we can hug again. Thank you all for being part of the conversation.
Thank you, Mahan.